This is Suit Up Sports. Suit Up Sports. Where opinions are as sharp as a tailored suit. No fluff, no gimmicks, just unfiltered, hard-hitting takes on sports and a whole lot more. It's time to suit up. Now here's your host, DJ the Suit Stout.
Welcome back. Suit Up Sports. I'm DJ the Suit Stout, along with Frank Garcia, 10-year NFL vet, and Big D producing the show. We are coming at you live right now. We've had some requests to do that, and we've only done it, I think, once or twice because we're worried about our foul language and things we may say that might
I'm not worried
get
about
people
that now.
upset and offended. We're also recording for TV, our TV show that will be on tonight at 8 p.m. But we just talked to our golf guy, Charlie Nance, about the PGA Championship and what's taking place yesterday and what's going on today with DeChambeau making a little run, getting to 4 under right now. Johnny Vegas coming back a little bit to 10 under. But we had a topic that one of our buddies, Alex Hunter, texted to Frank and I last night that started a little debate between us that we put out on social media, and the response started flying in pretty quickly. And the question was, what sport has the best athletes? And Alex, our buddy, was convinced that hockey is the sport with the best athletes. And then Frank and I both thought basketball. And so we kind of dove into that a little bit. Charlie, who joined us earlier, gave us his opinion. He thought water polo, which that came out of nowhere. But the more we think about it, we go, you know what? You got to be a pretty good athlete to play that. But it was a great question, especially while we're watching.
It's a long time debate. I mean, we've been having these kind of debates since we were little kids.
Yep.
And sitting on the playground or in 4th grade as you're waiting for recess to, in line, who's the best athlete?
Mm-hmm.
And what defines that, right? So we've seen all the great athletes come in, and I don't know if it's specifically like one person. We're not talking about Jim Thorpe. We're not talking about Bruce Jenner. We're not talking about Tiger Woods, not one individual, but we're talking about collectively as a sport. What group would be defined as what has the most athletes in that sport that could, maybe do something differently or, whatever that is, right? And I think the first thing we have to do before we even get into this conversation, because this is like an individual criteria thing, you have to define what athleticism is for you so that when you're looking at making your point that we understand that's your criteria,
right? So
that, the bigger, faster, stronger just doesn't beat out everything. And I think for you and I think that's one thing that we've, I think had a tendency to do as athletes ourselves is that guy's big.
Yep.
That guy's faster than everybody else. And that guy's stronger than everybody else. He's a great athlete, right? But there's also other factors that go into that. Is that what could he hit a ball? Could he dribble? Right? Could he catch? I've seen so many great athletes that are so physically dominant in my sport, is football, that can't walk and shoot, that can't bounce a basketball.
Yeah, you see
they look like like they're Hercules trying to bounce a ball and they can't do it.
Or you see football players or basketball players throwing the first pitch out of a baseball game, right, and they can't even throw a baseball.
That's right.
Like they can't even throw it 15 feet.
Or they catch like this. They catch like they're like stone hands.
Right.
They've never caught a ball in their life. Right. So what is athleticism? I think that's the first thing that you have to define for yourself, and I'll define it for me so that we can have the argument or the discussion based on what that is, because we could use sports science, right? And the reason why they do these things in the combine and other sports is to kind of help identify where that lactic acid buildup becomes in your body and your body just shuts down, right? Mm-hmm. And why some guys are able to push through that, right? And it's really just genetics on, maybe your endurance, the way you develop your body and those types of things. But all those things calculate in the quantification of what this means to be an athlete.
Yeah, and for me, and we put it out on social media last night, and we've had a ton of responses. And the sports that seem to come up the most are basketball, hockey, soccer. We've had some tennis in there, baseball, and football. For me, when I look at
the sports that didn't come up, however, believe it or not, looking through all the responses that we've had, were wrestling, boxing,
MMA.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And all those sports still calculate into what it takes to be defined as a great athlete.
No doubt. And one of the responses was from your brother Jason, who said wrestling, and obviously he coaches wrestling. You and him and your family have a wrestling background.
I was a 3-time state wrestling champ.
Yep, exactly. Which is why I got to take wrestling out of the equation.
Well, okay, then we have to take soccer out of the equation as well.
I don't want soccer in the equation. When you flop like these guys flop these days, I don't think you put in there.
That's not how you quantify athleticism.
No, I agree. And that's
so
what
we can't look at that and saying, okay, LeBron flops and he plays the game soft. So they disqualifies him from being a great athlete.
Here's how I look at it and again, we're talking what sport, not particular athlete.
That's right.
The way I look at it is what sport has players that could translate to other sports the most. And to me, it's basketball. So we talked about this with Charlie a little bit. I don't like Messi is the best soccer player in the world. What other sport is he going to be really good in?
Tennis,
maybe tennis.
I mean, if he had a
he's
tennis,
5'9", 5'10", right?
So is Agassi, so is Sampras, so are some of these guys.
Tennis could be one, but he's not playing basketball and he's not playing football.
Okay,
so and again, let me name a few more because again, I don't think in hockey, for instance. Now hockey does have some big 6'4" dudes that I guarantee could play football, right? So
Jeremy Pronger was 6'5", 240 pounds.
They've got some dudes, but the forwards, the ones that are known for scoring a lot,
the quick athletic guys,
most of them aren't going to be playing again basketball or football. I can name a bunch of basketball players and football players that I think you could see playing other sports, and we always you always.
So that's the way you're qualifying.
That's the way I'm qualifying, because what sport has the players that would translate to other sports the most? To me, it's basketball.
So the way I will define it for me. And I kind of gone back and forth from bigger, faster, stronger to hand-eye coordination to, making hard things look easy, things that I couldn't do. I was Arizona Athlete of the Year.
Yep.
You were a great athlete, here in the state of North Carolina. I was a state champion wrestler. I was both ways on football. I was drafted in baseball. I could play basketball with anybody.
Yep.
I can golf. All the things that, an athlete.
And Frank's not saying that to be arrogant. I mean, it's just the truth.
I'm just using that.
He was.
I'm using that because I was very blessed.
Yep.
God blessed me with some ability to be able to pick things up that were hard for some people and make them look easy.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So that's one of the things I'm going to use to help define that. But I think to define which athletes, which sport has the best athletes, I think you have to identify what sport has the most things that you would quantify to be a best athlete in. Hand-eye coordination, endurance, strength, speed, size. What sport do we look at when you're talking about the sports that exist that we mentioned, volleyball, baseball, basketball, soccer, swimming, wrestling, all the things that boxing, you have to be great at in order to be the best at. Right. The other thing that I'm going to use in this is how many people try it. Right. Because that, I think, factors into it. For example, hockey is going to be limited to a faction of the country here in the United States or certain countries that have cold weather. Right. You're not going to be a great hockey player, in my opinion, growing up in Florida.
Right.
Right. You're not going to have anybody to compete against. You have to compete against the best. But if you grow up in the Northeast, you go out in the backyard on a frozen pond and play hockey. They do it all the time.
Yeah.
So it's the amount of people that do hockey or play hockey is going to be limited to certain parts of the country. Right. So I think that kind of, for me, would kind of push that back. I want to say eliminate it, but I'll say push it back. That's not saying that they don't have to have hand-eye coordination. They don't have to have toughness. They don't have to have endurance. They don't have to have size.
Because hockey players have all that.
They have all of that.
All of it.
Right. But there's not many people that do it. Right. So because of that, you could be the best at it, but you just weren't good at anything else. Right. You weren't the best. You weren't the biggest. You weren't the fastest,
I know several hockey players that played pro hockey that are great golfers, but stink at everything else. They can't shoot a basketball. They would never be able to play. Yeah. But they're great at golf and they're great at hockey, but they stink at every other sport.
That's right. So,
not all of them, by the way.
Don't take what we're saying and make it one generalization and use that as an argument against. Right. These are all things that I consider when I start thinking about the best athletes in the world playing this sport, which takes a lot of all the things that we're talking about. And, toughness is going to be part of that as well. I think we have to qualify that, because what happens when things start getting hard, right? It makes cowards of us and we start to quit. We don't try as hard. That factor. So your mental toughness has to factor into, being the elite and being the best, where these athletes are going to challenge that. Right.
Yep.
So, soccer has to be near the top for me. Right. Globally, it's the most popular sport in the world.
Yep.
And that's why football even comes down a little notch, because it's not as popular. Basketball is the second or third most popular sport in the world, right? You know what the most popular sport in the world is?
Soccer, right?
No, it's cricket.
Cricket.
Because of how many people play it in the country that's being played. But if you're going to be an elite cricket player, look at all the people you're playing against. And that popularity doesn't mean the people that are playing, I guess, as much as the people that are watching, right? So that I'll take a step back from that statement. But the amount of people that play or try basketball, you can go play basketball, me and you one-on-one. I can go play by myself.
Yep.
Don't need anybody else except the ball.
Yep.
Baseball, you can't do that.
Right.
You can develop your athleticism and your skills, based on a machine, throwing the ball, things like that. But, I can't just go out in the backyard and do that. I have to go somewhere. It's going to cost me money, right? So money is a factor in that. Basketball doesn't cost me any money to go out there and shoot or dribble, things like soccer doesn't cost any money for me to go develop my skills and things like that. I need several players to be able to play.
Or a ball on a wall.
Yeah, but I need several players to play a game, not to develop my skills. Football is one of those things that you can work on without playing the game, but until you play the game, right, you're not going to have the physicality of the toughness and the hitting and things like that. So, all these things are kind of determining factors on what sport has the greatest athletes for me. And, when I start looking at that and the sports science that goes around that, right, that you have ways of quantifying that, right? And the NFL, it's the bench press test. It's the 40-yard dash. It's the box jump. It's the vertical. Right there, it's the size, how big you are, how fast you are. Jordan Davis, who plays for the Eagles, was arguably one of the largest human beings on this planet at 6'6", 360 pounds when he ran his 40-yard dash at 4.8. To me, that's as equally as impressive as Usain Bolt running a 4.1, or you fill in the blank of running 4.2.
Because he's a big dude.
That is a tremendous athleticism or display of athleticism for a man that size.
Yep.
Right. So, can he dribble? Can he use his quicks? Is he going to be elite? Probably not, but he's going to be one of the most explosive athletes on this planet because of that. Right. And there's so many people in this country that play sports, that are like that.
Well, and when you think in history of sports and you think of the great athletes, I think when you name some of them, whether it be an Olympic athlete, but when you do think of some of the great athletes, the two that come to mind right away, is Bo Jackson and Deion Sanders. And Bo Jackson not only was a great football player, was an all-star baseball player. If you ever watched the 30-30 on him when he broke his hip and when he was hurt, he taught himself to shoot a bow and arrow while lying on his back using his feet, and became almost as good as anybody in the country at shooting a bow and arrow. He could throw a football from his knees. I mean, all these things he could do. Then you got Deion, same thing. Deion was a very good baseball player. First player to ever play a MLB game and an NFL game in the same day. So you
I could counter with Jim Thorpe or players like that.
No doubt.
And I don't mean counter. I mean add to that conversation.
No doubt.
And again, I think that we have to be weary and stay away from the unicorn, right? And define that as that sport has those great athletes, because there have been great athletes in every sport that have been able to do all of those things. And if we're talking about the greatest athlete of all time, right, the individual, Bo Jackson's going to be up there. Deion's going to be up there.
Yeah.
Michael Jordan is going to be up there. Guys that make the hard things look easy, that have never done it, and they can do it as well as anybody else very quickly and efficiently.
Well, one of the questions I posed to you before we started the segment was if you have a and Connor, we're getting some feedback here. Connor says MMA has best athletes, which we both talked about too. I wouldn't disagree with that either. Those guys are amazing. But one of the things I said earlier is that if we were going to do a competition to find out who was the best athlete, what sport would, and we're having a draft, right? So we've got me and you and Dylan and Connor and Andrew and everyone that's following us. We're
trying to find the best individual athlete.
What sport is going to get the most players drafted out of it? In other words, are we going to draft more basketball players? We're going to draft more MMA guys. We're going to draft
by numbers, DJ.
To me, hoops still seems to be the leader. By
numbers, there's going to be more football players than there are basketball players, right? Because you have 22 guys on offense, or 11 guys on offense, 11 guys on defense. You have kickers and punters thrown in there, and some specialists, right? So you're going to have 22 guys versus basketball where you're going to have 5, right? 5 stars. And we're not talking about the guys on the bench, we're talking about the 5 stars.
But
right?
still, if you're doing a draft, even with 5 stars,
but the pool is going to be different.
Sure, but I still think basketball would probably lead the way in the picks, because I think when you look at guys like, again, when we're translating into different sports, Allen Iverson's a guy that we talked about. I got to believe that he would have been a very good soccer player.
Russell Westbrook
was a very good football player. Iverson was. Russell Westbrook.
Iverson was a great quarterback in Virginia, and also
could have played
receiver.
college. Yep, exactly. And great basketball player. Would have been good at soccer if he would have played, I'm sure. Russell Westbrook, every time you see him play, you can't tell me that he doesn't look like a guy that could play football.
How good was Steve Smith been in soccer?
He had his oldest son.
He couldn't play
very good soccer.
He couldn't play basketball.
Right.
Right. I've seen him dribble. I have, and he looks like he's a caveman dribbling a bowling ball.
But I'm sure he would have been a great soccer player.
Yeah.
I mean, his oldest son was a very good soccer player. Steve has that build. So, I think basketball would have a lot of, you're right, football too. I mean, we talked about the receiver from Miami,
Tyreek Hill.
You got to believe he would be very good in soccer.
But play basketball.
Exactly. See, that's where the height thing comes in.
I don't know if he could hit I know if he could skate.
Right. Now, I did see Devin Booker, the shooting guard from the Phoenix Suns, yesterday was taking some BP with some buddies out at a baseball field. They weren't throwing it hard, but I did see him knock 2 way over the fence.
Well, I mean, that's what's crazy. DJ, we come from an era and a time where we played multiple sports.
Yep.
Right. So you played soccer, you played baseball, you played football, all the different sports that we played growing up. Unfortunately, I feel like those days are few and far between because of how much, sports specific things have become and how much it's become monetized.
Yeah, you're right, because especially with the NIL deals, you're going to go to what sport's going to pay the most. Now, there might be, Charlie referred to it as a unicorn. There might be a unicorn athlete that's going to be like Travis Hunter. He's a very good basketball player.
Yeah.
He could have played both, no doubt about it. The money was in football. Now, there might be a guy that's going to get money for both. We haven't had that yet, which is an interesting question too. We haven't had that player in the NIL era that played 2 sports and got paid by 2 sports. It's coming. It's coming, but it hasn't happened really because of what you just said.
Well, it's so new. And
players are focusing on one sport, but it's coming, and that'll be a great time.
It'll be a baseball football combination, with the receiver. I wanted to play. I was believe it or not, I felt like I was a better baseball player than I was a football player. I was definitely a better wrestler than I was a football player.
Yeah.
But wrestling didn't do what?
Didn't get you paid or give you a career. Correct.
And baseball, my argument against myself, and I had a long discussion with my dad because my college wanted me to come out and play baseball, because I knew of, that what my background was.
Mm-hmm.
I had to make a decision because for my position, I had to maximize my strength, my speed, my endurance, all the things that helped me compete so I could monetize that and become a professional. There wasn't many 6'2", 280-pound baseball players. Cecil Fielder was the only guy in our era that Frank Thomas was another guy that we looked at. So, tight end, at Auburn, played baseball, become a really good baseball player.
Tony Gonzalez, basketball,
Tony Gonzalez is another basketball player, football player, right?
Yep.
There's a lot of multi-sport athletes, right? But you have to make a decision because you have to become at that level. You have to focus on what's going to make you great, right? And receivers may not have to have all those things. Running backs may not have to have all those things. But linemen, in order for me to compete against 6'5", 220-pound dudes, I had to be the stronger, faster guy.
Yeah, that's right.
I couldn't play baseball because I had to focus on lifting and running.
Yeah, which wasn't conducive for baseball.
That's right.
Harrison Gates says, in his opinion, football is the best athletes, mix of speed, strength, and physicality. He also says, which I said, hitting a Major League Baseball pitch is the hardest thing in sports. I totally agree with him on that. And, when the baseball slide, Odell Beckham, great receiver in the NFL for years, very good soccer player as well. So some of those receivers in football, you could totally see sliding over to a sport like tennis.
Ocho Cinco's a great athlete.
Exactly. And he kicked field goals and kicked as well as some of the
field goals. He played soccer.
He played soccer, yeah.
He argued that he could have played professional soccer if he would have committed to that as a young kid. And that's another thing that we have to consider too, is that, growing up, culturally speaking, right, the money isn't going to be there to play some of these hand-eye coordinate baseball, for example, right? What's happening in baseball? It's such a skill-specific sport that I have to get more reps at than everybody else, that if I don't have the proper coaching equipment and money, I'm not going to compete at a younger age.
Right.
So I'm going to be behind everybody to where I'm at skill-wise. Athletically, I might be faster, I might be bigger, I might be stronger, and those guys are always going to get a chance because they think they can teach those skills to some degree when you get to that level. But at that early age, culturally speaking, you look at the bigger, faster, stronger, the better athletes are African American, right? They're just going to say what it is, and with their background, it's going to be a lot of basketball, it's going to be football, because that's their way out to get to that next level so they can maximize how much money they're going to be. That's what this country is going to be the most popular for athletes, football, basketball, right? So because of that, a lot of those athletes are coming out. They don't play baseball. They don't play soccer. It's too expensive.
Right. They want to play the sport that's going to help them get out and make money.
It doesn't cost money to go out there. Like you said, it doesn't cost money to go out there and take a ball and go shoot and to develop those skills doing that.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. I agree. We've had some more responses come in. We do have a couple tennis, which we both agree. Tennis guys are good athletes, the endurance, the strength, the speed.
And that would be my argument against football, right? Is that with football, right, the explosiveness absolutely exists. But the endurance, I know that over time you start getting fatigued in the fourth quarter and things like that. You only play once a week.
Yeah. Right.
So there's plenty of time to rest. And the time between plays for me as an athlete, I had time to rest to get my work again. It wasn't a constant motion where my aerobic muscles had to kick in. Everything was anaerobic, quick, fast, quick twitch, explosive.
Yep.
Boxing, wrestling, right? It's a constant battle. It's only for 3 minutes at a time, 3-minute periods. Boxing, you got 12 rounds, 15 rounds.
Man.
I mean, you maximize the endurance plus the explosiveness, right? Plus the physicality. Boxing is going to be up there. MMA is another good argument, 3 5-minute rounds.
And in MMA, I mean, it's when you're boxing, you're on your feet. MMA, you're on your feet and you're also on the ground grappling. So
it's constant motion. You can't. If you stop, what happens? You get choked out or knocked out.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're going to be elite, you have to be. That's why Connor has a great point with MMA because of the constant motion. That's why. I mean, even in soccer, there's some stagnant. With what you do, there's going to be some explosive. You have to sprint, but a lot of times it's just about positioning and spacing. At that level, everybody's not chasing the ball, running full speed the entire time like you see when your kids out there at the YMCA.
Yeah.
You have positions, you play with space, you know how to move, you know when to move, you know how to recover.
Yeah.
Right? So there's a lot of recovery time in soccer that people don't see. In basketball, however, you watch the guys like Steph Curry. Watching what he does without the basketball. Does he stand around some? Yes, at the 3-point line. Everybody has to catch
normally he's moving.
You cannot go that hard, that fast, for that long, and not be fatigued or get injured. So, and the amount of games they play in a season is 82. So that's also has to factor into that.
Yep.
Right? But Steph Curry without the basketball, he's not stagnant.
No, he's constantly moving.
Ray Allen without the basketball as a great shooter is not stagnant.
Yep. They're
constantly moving off screen, setting picks.
Yep.
Moving, taking some physicality with those things.
Yeah, Zach McElroy, one of my buddies, he's a tennis pro over in Palm Beach, West Palm area. Great dude, and of course he's going to stay tennis. Or he stayed tennis early. Now he's staying. This is a good question. What's the ratio of athletes who can kick a ball compared to athletes who can throw and catch? He believes that so more people in the United States at least can throw and catch. That's probably a good point. And it probably goes back to kind of what you were alluding to earlier, where a lot of our communities aren't worried about playing soccer, kicking a ball, or kicking a football. If they're going to play football, they're playing wide receiver, quarterback, depending on their size. I kicked football because I was a soccer player and I was too small to play anywhere else. I wanted to play defensive end, but after junior high, those dreams were over. So I kicked football, and I could have kicked in college and chose to play soccer. But my point is, that is a valid point because, depending on where you grow up, it's probably depending upon what sport you're going to play.
That's exactly right.
And
also, globally speaking, right? We prioritize what sports. What are the main sports that we have? America's sport is what? It used to be baseball.
It's football
It's
now.
no longer baseball. I think.
Will Perez thinks baseball players are the most versatile, and we're talking about baseball in America. I would tend to agree with that. I think baseball players, you do see a lot. You can see a lot of baseball players that play football and basketball. Not necessarily once they get up in college because they're they focus on
what's the name? Trout.
Mike Trout.
Mike Trout.
Could have been a
Mike
great
Trout
football
would
player.
have been a great football player. I would have put him at running back all day long. Maybe a safety, something like that, depending on his physicality level.
Yep.
But his speed and his size and his explosiveness, Mike Trout were guys that would have been able to transition and play football. The problem with baseball players is their stature. Ball players is more similar to a basketball player, and I don't think there's many baseball players that could play basketball, just because of the height and the skill that it takes.
Yeah, same
and
as
I don't
soccer.
know if any basketball players could play baseball. However, there have been some that have done it. They have not, and they've done it at a high level.
You think of like Judge as a tall guy. Dave Winfield was all state in football, basketball, and baseball. But you're right. You don't. The taller baseball players are few and far between.
We're not talking about, and again, this is not talking about the unicorns.
Right.
When you talk about Winfield, agree. When you talk about Bo Jackson, agree.
The
When you
handful
talk
of
about
guys like that.
Frank Thomas, agree.
Yep. Judge.
Right? You could probably throw some shortstops in there that would have been a great receiver.
Yeah.
Right. Ozzie Newsome would have been a great receiver.
Yep.
Guys like that. Those are the unicorns. We're talking about the other guys that are out there. What would they have been able to do? What sport has the most of them?
Well, and you're talking about where we give basketball players, and the reason that we both agree they probably would be the most athletic, because they do have height and speed and endurance and strength. But you're right. You don't see many 6'9" guys playing soccer. They wouldn't be able to do it. Even though you see Wemby running around playing soccer and whatever, you don't see many 6'9" guys hitting fastballs.
They don't have the quick twitch muscles that is required to play some of those different sports.
Right. Allen Iverson, great point guard in the NBA. We talked about him. Was a great football player, and I'm sure if he would have played soccer from the time he was 5 years old, he probably would have been a great soccer player. So, it's a great question, and there's no right or wrong answer. I wish we could, and maybe we do this one day. We do a draft, and we get 10 or 12 people that have a
see
team.
What sport they come from.
Yeah, and you can draft any player in this competition, and we put down what the competition is, what it consists of, what's the criteria, and then we have a draft, and we can even put it online.
And that again, I don't mean to interrupt your thought.
No,
but that would mean to me, I guess I go back to our buddy Alex in our conversation.
He's a very good athlete in his own right.
He's a great athlete. Alex is one of the best athletes I've ever met.
Yeah, he's great.
Right? He's a great athlete. Second best athlete I know. Right? Behind
me. Although, let's use Alex as an example, and Alex, don't get mad at me if you hear this. Alex is a very good basketball player. We play basketball with him. He's very good. Great baseball, softball player. He plays in volleyball leagues. I bet
golfer.
Great golfer.
Turn himself into a really good golfer.
Great golfer. I wouldn't see him as a soccer player. Almost because his length and to me,
his body type is not built for that. But
that's my point.
But that doesn't mean that all those other
maybe
things.
A good goalie. Maybe
things don't exist. Alex would be a great goalie.
Yeah,
all those other things don't exist. Yeah. Just because you don't have that one attribute doesn't mean that you can't be all those other things.
Mm-hmm.
You just wouldn't be able to be God didn't build your body to play that sport.
Sorry, next podcast too is made up of two beautiful ladies, Gwen and Krista. So if you haven't watched their podcast, watch it. If you like funny stories and
drinking
wine and women bitching about their husbands and things like that. But they're asking me how I'm feeling, and I'm feeling better. My leg feels great. Best it's felt in a year. The surgery that I had Tuesday, where they took out a disc and put in a new one, made of titanium, seems to be working great. The stomach area where they went in is still very, very sore. So this is the most I've sat up since the surgery. And but I'm feeling good. So I'm hoping that within the next 5-7 days, my stomach pain's gone, and I may even have a couple cocktails today. Don't tell Krista on that podcast, but I may have a couple cocktails.
You may be having a couple right.
I'm in the mood. I'm in the mood. So best athlete topic's been great. And Alex, thank you for texting us that. And if you guys have any ideas for topics that you want us to go over, we'd love to do it. Before we leave today, I want to get into two games tonight. You got the Celtics and the Knicks. in Game 6, everybody saw in Game 4 where Jason Tatum was having an unbelievable game, 42 points, was hitting threes every time he put them up. His Achilles, he tears his Achilles, he goes down, non-contact injury, and the Knicks win. They come into Boston. Boston still has a very good team, by the way, without Jason Tatum, and you saw that they pulled together. They played great, and they wore the Knicks out of the building. Tonight, we go back to New York, Knicks with a 3-2 lead. What do you think happens tonight? I think the Knicks end it tonight. I think the Celtics gave their one blast the other night, and I think tonight the Knicks take care of business.
I think if we look at trends, across the NBA and the home team, the advantage that they have, momentum matters. The Garden, Madison Square Garden there in New York, I think is going to be something. I don't know what they call it anymore.
That's it, Madison Square Garden.
They've changed the name all venues so many times.
Yeah.
But the Celtics with Tatum, I thought, they had a great chance to beat the Knicks. Going back to Madison Square Garden. Knowing that you don't have your captain, your leader on the team going to be there, I think the momentum and the crowd are a big factor in that game and help the Knicks carry into that fourth quarter. I could see this game getting out of control very, very easily. I could also see the Celtics pushing until that, because they still have that champ mentality.
Yeah.
You got to knock them out. They're the defending champs, and you got to knock them out. But they have a guy that can do that. And I know you love this guy to death, and you've called him one of the greatest clutch players of all time.
That I've seen.
I'm not going to go that far
Yeah.
into saying that yet.
You're talking about Brunson.
Yeah, I'm talking about Brunson, but I'm not going that far yet. He has a clutch gene in him for sure. And that's one of the fun things that, we've had the ability to watch throughout these playoffs. But, he's really kind of stepped up, and he didn't have that great of a game last game.
Which makes you think tonight is going to be.
Which makes you think tonight, going home, Madison Square Garden in front of the home crowd, guys like that tend to rise to the occasion.
Yeah, and you look at Brunson, what he did at Villanova, clutch. The Dallas Mavericks, when he was there, and they should have never let him leave, by the way. But he was clutch when they won their championship there. He's been clutch ever since he's been a Knick. And you're right. I think at home in New York tonight, it lines up perfectly for Brunson. Listen, the Celtics still have a very good team. I mean, Brown is an all-star. Horford has been there before. Porzingis has played awful. He's due to play well. They had Pritchard is one of the best shooters in the NBA. So
and he's a great decision maker. Brown and Pritchard, if they want to have a chance tonight, have to really step up. And I said that last game. And they did. Both of them played their asses off. Pritchard had one of his best games. He's usually coming off the bench to relieve Brown, but Brown, and Pritchard on the floor, create a different dynamic that the Knicks haven't seen. They need their backup bigs to step up. That other guy to take that role. Jason Brown last time did that. And if he can do it, and that's the reason why you're going to have to knock him out. It could be a very close game, but I could also see this, like I said, getting out of hand if they're not on their A game.
Totally agree. Harrison, again, we got a message trying to think of MMA fighters translate to other sports and think about how NFL players would, if they train for MMA. And he used Greg Hardy as an example of what was a nasty athletic football player who went in the MMA and got his butt beat every time he went out there.
Well,
but that would be I will say this. I can name you some. I guarantee you. What was the linebacker from the Pittsburgh Steelers? I'd put him in the MMA, and I wouldn't want to fight him. Joey
Tatum or Lamb.
No. Recently, he just retired a couple years ago.
Harrison.
Yeah. I wouldn't want to fight him
James
in the
Harrison.
MMA. So you're right. I think there would be some players that would go over to the MMA. But again,
Ray Lewis.
Yeah.
So let me say this, and I know this to be true because I've done both sports and I've seen how many NFL players, did this sport as well.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Wrestling is a phenomenal sport if you want to transition that into football. Wrestling doesn't translate whatsoever into baseball or basketball because I've seen some state championship wrestlers, national championship wrestlers that have played that can't dribble, they can't shoot, they can't hit. There's no balls, but guess what? They can run, and they're gonna be like little pit bulls, and they're gonna be able to take you down and beat you in a fight.
Yep.
Right. So there's two completely different things, and what we're talking about. And that's for me the reason why I would disqualify MMA from this conversation of most athletes, best athlete, a conversation, because I don't know if they could do baseball. I don't know if they could do, some of the other sports.
Yeah.
And I also say this, coming from football going into wrestling, It's a completely different type of training, right?
Mm-hmm.
I come from an anaerobic environment in football where I'm explosive every 30 seconds or so between plays. I get to rest. In wrestling, the fatigue factor sets in right away.
No
I had to
doubt.
train my body completely different. When in high school, I'd come from the football field to the wrestling mat. You wrestle a 6-minute match, your forearms are locked up.
Oh.
You can't squeeze your hands. It feels like your body is cramping. You don't move because you haven't trained those aerobic muscles yet. So once you've done that for a while and you get into wrestling shape, football's easy.
Mm-hmm.
Football's easy, right? Because of the type of training. So that's the difference between, for me, the difference in sports and why football players maybe don't transcend into basketball very well. Who was it the MMA fighter that fought Floyd Mayweather? The same type of thing, right?
Well, that was our Irish boy.
Irish, yeah. O'Connor.
Come on, Big D. You know
What's his name?
how I forget his name.
I can't believe that we're forgetting his
The
name.
billionaire.
Yeah.
The Irishman.
With the strut. He walks with the strut.
Conor McGregor.
Conor McGregor, thank you. I said
Oh, my
Conor.
God.
I said
Yeah,
Conor.
you're close.
I said
Holy
Conor.
crap, we struggled on that one.
Like, you can come up with McGregor for it.
I'm thinking, yeah, I
But
can get it.
when Conor McGregor fought Mayweather,
Yeah,
he looked great for how many rounds?
But-
He was the more explosive, better boxer for how many rounds?
probably 2, 3.
Probably like 4 or 5.
Yeah.
First 4 or 5, he was holding his own. He was stiffing Mayweather.
Mm-hmm.
And then what happened?
Get tired.
Fatigue set in. You got into the later rounds, and what happened? Mayweather walked right over him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? It was no contest, really, because he couldn't hold his arms up anymore.
Yep.
That's the difference.
Yep.
So when you're looking at MMA, they're not – boxers are better athletes, in my opinion. Now, the wrestling part of that, if McGregor was able to go out there and wrestle Mayweather, it would have been a first-round knockout.
Well, see, that's why I would say MMA would be over boxing, because the MMA guys stand up and fight. So there's rounds, so they also grapple. And so as you talk about wrestling, how tired that is. Imagine if you were wrestling and then had to stand up and also box and go back and forth.
Every street fight turns into what?
Usually a wrestling match.
100%.
When with me, they don't. They go one punch,
Every
they go
street
down.
fight turns into a wrestling match. Every street fight turns into a wrestling match where you're going to have to learn how to wrestle and grapple, right?
Yeah.
And some guys know how, some guys don't. Right? And the guys that don't get their asses kicked
No, it's true.
very quickly,
It's true.
and it's over. And really, McGregor could have killed Mayweather if it was a brawl.
Yeah.
But it wasn't a brawl. It was a boxing match.
Yeah.
Right. He went into his arena. So which is better? Which do you value more?
I mean, I think that if you can do both, that gives you an edge.
Well, no,
right?
I mean, Mayweather was dominant in his sport.
And
McGregor would have been dominant in his sport.
Yeah.
But which is better?
well, I would still go MMA because you can do both. Mayweather can't wrestle before, but McGregor can box and wrestle.
If Mayweather trained to wrestle, he could wrestle.
But probably not. I don't know. That's a good question, because I bet you a lot of boxers would say we could
If
do that
Mayweather
too.
trained to wrestle, he would be able to train to wrestle.
But the interesting part about that is the young kids now are all gravitating towards MMA now and not boxing.
That's where the money's at.
That the money's split that way. Yeah,
That's where the money's at. I mean, people are going to go where the money's at, and that's where the popularity is.
Exactly.
Because what do we see? We see. I mean, Dana White has done an incredible
He's done a
job
great
of marketing MMA. Right, the president of the United States is going to MMA fights.
yeah. No,
Right?
you're totally right.
So that's where the money's at.
We're going to end real quick, and we'll spend more time on this next week. But for those of you who watched our show Monday and are watching now, if you're a Hornets fan, very disappointed when they're pulling the envelope out. We
have not discussed that.
We haven't got any. And again, this will take more time. But I did want to just end with the fact that
I think we need time to cool off. From that
yeah,
still.
I was bitter. I was wanting them to sell a team and get out of Charlotte. The NBA is not ever going to give us a break. And the fact that Dallas Mavericks with a 1.8% chance gets the first pick in the draft is ridiculous.
After Luka,
after the Luka trade, and it's like
makes it look so conspiracy theory based.
Exactly. And the fact that we did talk about this on Friday about the way they do the codes and they do it off the camera. So, no one really knows what goes on. It does seem very mysterious. So as a Hornet fan, I was ticked off and I still am. But the more went through the draft and the players. Obviously, the first pick here, Cooper Flagg, was the home run guaranteed lock as much as you're going to have one. So he's going to go first. The rest of the guys that we did talk about, there are some really good players. This is a deep draft. And the guy that keeps getting mocked up to the Hornets is the guy we talked about, BJ Edgecombe from Baylor. He was a freshman last year, great defender, explosive athlete. He gets compared to Anthony Edwards, Ant-Man, quite a bit. And if you watch his highlights, you'll see it.
Anthony Edwards is becoming my favorite basketball player.
I agree. I think he's the best player in the NBA.
You talk about athletes and dogs and going out there and getting it done. He for what he's doing in Minnesota right now, he's put them on his shoulders. And he is dominating people out there.
Yeah, and that's who this kid gets comped to, and even down. If you watch his highlights, the athleticism, the way he dunks the ball, the way he gets to the hole, you'll see it right away. But even down to the fact that when Anthony Edwards came out of college, he wasn't known as a great shooter yet. He was an okay shooter. Now he's turned himself into a great shooter. Edgecombe, they say the same thing. He's a solid shooter, but he's going to have to improve on that. And if he does, he's going to be unbelievable because athleticism, he's a dog. He plays defense. Yeah, I told you.
And that's where we have to continue to remind ourselves when we're having all these conversations about greatest athletes. You can teach yourself how to do skills, right? Now, you might not be as fast as Steph Curry when it comes to, but you can teach yourself how to shoot a basketball.
Right.
The things you cannot teach that has God-given ability behind it is what? There's three things.
Well, effort for sure.
Well, I mean, size.
Speed.
Size and speed and strength.
Yeah.
Right? Those are the three things that God has given certain people that you cannot teach.
Yeah.
And strength is one of them. Yeah, you can lift weights, but I promise you, you're going to get to a point where you max out and you're not going to make those gains. Where other guys, they're going to hit that point and go boosh because of their chemistry and the way that they're built.
Yeah.
So God gives strength to certain people, and it's not the length of your hair that's going to get that strength. It's just your genetics.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And those three things you cannot teach. Everything else that we talked about, you can.
Yep. Well, like I said, with the Hornets, I know we'll talk about that Monday because everyone is ticked off about it. The system stinks, and we'll dive further in that Monday. Edgecombe is, all the analysts, do say he's by far the best, most explosive athlete in the draft, best defensive player for that. Questions where he'll play, will he be a one or a two, should he go to a point guard? That remains to be seen. But when it comes to getting to the basket and explosiveness and playing defense, the kid's great. So I've at least made myself feel a little better because I really liked him in college watching Baylor play. We watched them play when we were in Vegas in the NCAA tournament, if you remember, and he had a great game when we were at the Virgin Hotel there. So, I've at least sold myself that at least we're going to get a kid like him who seems to fit a lot of the criteria that we like. But enjoy your weekend. PGA should be fun. The leaderboard's getting tight. Scheffler's just
Come on, Scheffler.
So I think he'll make a run. Hopefully McIlroy does as well. DeChambeau, I think, finished at 3 under. You got the PGA, you got the hoops tonight. Toronto
great weekend.
Yeah, Panthers in Game 6 and
the schedule came out too. I'm sure we'll cover that
Monday. We're going to dive into the Panthers schedule as well and see what you think about wins and losses there. Thank you guys for joining us and have a great weekend.